There was a time when website speed was not important. Even websites that load at a snail's pace, slower than a slow loris, can rank highly in Google search results. Things have changed since then. Today, speed is critical, and if your website is slow, regardless of how good your content is, you will struggle to rank on Google search results. Enabling cache is one of the numerous methods for optimizing your website's performance. Cache versions of your website's static content can significantly increase your website's performance. Caching is one of the several strategies to optimize your website's page load speed. For your WordPress site, there are dozens of caching plugins available. Everyone claims to be the best in their field. Among the most popular names are WP Rocket, WP Fastest Cache, Breeze, Comet Cache. The list could go on indefinitely. Which one are you going to use? Is there a viable alternative to all of these ostensibly popular choices? Say hello to LiteSpeed Cache, a newcomer to the caching industry that is causing such large ripples that it is impossible to ignore. LiteSpeed Cache, developed by LiteSpeed Technologies, is eclipsing all other caching plugins. What makes this caching plugin so unique? I will reveal the solution in this review. I will go through all the LiteSpeed Cache settings on all the sections while explaining each option so that you can perfectly optimize your WordPress website for faster load times. LiteSpeed Cache detailed explanation. LiteSpeed Cache plugin installation. The LiteSpeed Cache plugin is a free download from the WordPress plugin repository. If you are using a LiteSpeed or Open LiteSpeed server, you will obtain the best caching results. If you use another web server, the caching mechanism will fail to function. The only way to utilize the caching mechanism of the LiteSpeed Cache plugin while running on a non-LiteSpeed server is to use the QUIC.cloud service. Therefore, before you begin installing the LiteSpeed Cache, verify that your hosting provider supports the LiteSpeed or Open LiteSpeed web servers. If not, you may want to consider switching to a different host that does. LiteSpeed Caching plugin configuration. General Settings tab. Upgrade automatically. You can turn this off, but that makes little sense. Eventually, you'll be updating the plugin. Indeed, automated updates have never broken my site in the way so far. Domain identifier. To utilize QUIC.cloud, you must obtain a domain key. This is not necessary if you wish to completely abandon the QUIC.cloud feature. I do, however, use it in conjunction with Cloudflare. QUIC.cloud is a content delivery network solution that includes a variety of useful functions such as crucial CSS creation, picture placement, and conversion to WebP format. The critical point to grasp here is that if you are not utilizing a LiteSpeed or Open LiteSpeed server, employing the QUIC.cloud service becomes a requirement if you wish to utilize the caching technique. You can skip these three and go straight to notifications. Notifications irritate me. As a result, I always leave it turned off. What you desire is entirely up to you. There is nothing to configure on the Tuning Settings tab. Just skip it and save the changes. Cache. There are numerous options here, which may appear intimidating. Do not be concerned. I'll guide you through the settings that I use and works perfectly for my site. Let us begin. Enable cache. Naturally, on. That is why you have installed the LiteSpeed Cache plugin in the first place. Switching this off makes no sense. Cache logged in users. Enabling this option is not recommended if you are an administrator. Additionally, if there are a large number of users logging in, ensure that this is turned off. Enabling this option results in the generation of an excessive number of cached pages, most of which will be ignored. Cache commenters. Turning it on or off makes little difference. However, I prefer to leave it turned on. Cache Rust API. This particular choice makes little sense for the majority of the site. You may leave it on, but if your site begins to malfunction, turn it off. Cache login pages. If you are not using a third-party service such as Cloudflare that allows you to limit login rate and prevents bad actors from initiating login attempts, I recommend that you leave this on. However, if your login page is not functioning properly, you should disable the option. While I do have Cloudflare protection in place, I feel obligated to inform you that LiteSpeed servers natively protect admin URLs. Yes, the LiteSpeed server is capable of preventing and deterring brute force attacks. Yes, leave it turned on. Cache PHP resources. Yes, leave it turned on. It's especially beneficial if you're utilizing poorly coded themes and plugins. Cache mobile. If your website has a responsive design, leave it off. You can enable it if your site is AMP enabled or if you have mobile specific design or content. List of mobile user agents. This is required if Cache mobile is enabled. There is already a default list. If you're enabling mobile caching and notice that something is missing from the list of mobile user agents, you can add it one user agent per line. Private cached URLs. This is necessary if your website allows for content to be viewed differently by various people. For instance, if you have an e-commerce site with multiple users who each have their user profile, and require access to their unique user profiles. If the majority of your users do not log in, you will not require this feature. Because my websites lack this functionality, I keep it blank. It is never touched by me. Force cache URLs. If you enter values here, regardless of whether no caching settings are enabled, these sites will be cached. If you're operating a simple blog, leave it blank. Force public cache URLs. If you want to cache specific pages, you can specify them here. This is very useful if you want to exclude specific pages from exclusion criteria based on strings. Leave this area blank for a simple blog. Drop query strings. You should be careful about it. Leave the default values. There are query strings whose contents vary, for example, language, currency, etc. In these instances, such pages must be cached separately. Again, there are query strings whose content is constant. For instance, affiliate cookies, Google trackers, and Facebook trackers are all examples. Cache, TTL tab. Just don't change any damn thing here. Everything is as it should be. Everything is pre-configured. You can change things, but I will not recommend doing that. The options that you will get here are default private cache TTL, default public cache TTL, default front page TTL, default feed TTL, default REST TTL, default HTTP status code page TTL. Leave them as is, please. Cache, Purge tab. Again, the options you find here are already configured. You don't need to poke around. It is better that you leave them as is. I will still give you a quick explanation. Purge all on upgrade. By default, this option is enabled. Maintain the status quo. When a new version of LiteSpeed Cache becomes available and is upgraded, all existing cache files are deleted and new ones are created. This is the safest course of action, as it eliminates the possibility of dispute. Auto purge rules for publish, update. When you publish a new post or make an edit to an existing one, you must guarantee that it appears on the website. This implies that previous caches must be deleted. The default configuration is flawless, therefore, abandon it. Serve stale. This is an excellent option. It is enabled by default and should be left enabled. When you update existing posts or publish new ones, LiteSpeed Cache can perform two functions. It will provide a cached version of the post to visitors while updating the cache file in the background. Alternatively, it can simply delete the old cache and force the visitor to wait, during which time a new cache file will be dynamically produced and served. Of course, delaying your visitor is not a smart idea, and dynamically building cache files to serve your visitors increases the server burden. That, too, is not desirable. Scheduled purge URLs. If you wish to remove specific URLs at specific times, you must specify them here. Each line should have a unique URL. Schedule purge time. Here, you must provide the precise period during which the scheduled purge URLs will be purged. Bear in mind that you can use this even if you have not enabled the auto purge rules. If you have already configured auto purge rules, these options are ineffective. Additionally, if your website contains content generated by external sources that do not fit inside the scope of auto purge rules, this option is available. Purge all hooks. The field is already filled in. That is, anytime specified activities are completed, a site-wide purge occurs. The default list is flawless. However, if desired, you can add a few other items, most notable hooks from plugins that affect your site's look. If you're not comfortable creating hooks, manually clear all cache every time you make a site-wide design update. Don't forget to save the changes once finished. Cache excludes tab. These are never used by me. You may if you wish. The following are the settings that you will get. Do not cache URLs. This can be used to prevent specific URLs from being cached. You must create a list of all URLs that you do not wish to cache. For instance, I do not want WP admin to be cached, which is why I included it in the list. Do not cache query strings. If your website has query strings that often change the content, you should disable caching for such query strings. This is especially beneficial for multilingual websites, e-commerce sites that accept many currencies, and so on. Do not cache categories. All categories are cached by default. If you want to exclude particular categories from caching, you can do so here. Do not cache tags. I never use tags. They are largely irrelevant in the modern day. While they can aid in the search, the primary concern is that they contribute to the issue of thin content. You should also avoid utilizing tags. If you're using tags and want to prevent particular tags from being cached, you can specify them here. Do not cache cookies. Cookies are designed to expire after a specified period. Certain cookies have a longer shelf life, while others have a shorter shelf life. I will suggest that you refrain from tinkering with cookies. They serve a purpose and should be left alone. Do not cache user agents. User agents assist in identifying applications, operating systems, and vendors, among other things. Kindly refrain from caching them. That is never a wise course of action. Do not cache roles. Generally, I do not include administrator or editor roles. You may choose to exclude other roles. The roles that are currently available will be listed here. Cache ESI tab. This is a more advanced feature that enables you to benefit from caching even for dynamic sites that are not intended to be cached. This function caches and accelerates the delivery of static components of a dynamic page. Cloudflare offers this feature, but only on the enterprise subscription, which is quite expensive. Fortunately, LiteSpeed Cache includes this feature. I use it in conjunction with Cloudflare's other features, and believe me when I say that it works flawlessly. In case you weren't aware, ESI or Edge Side Includes is typically not adjustable from the server, and most certainly not the standard caching plugins that are wildly popular in the WordPress environment. LiteSpeed Cache is capable of this. ESI is a highly sophisticated technology, and you must use caution. This enables you to convert any content, function, or widget to ESI, from which you may choose how to cache it. For example, you can choose whether it is cached publicly or privately. You can even give it its TTL. You may even choose to keep them entirely dynamic. While the ESI function in LiteSpeed Cache works flawlessly, you may experience troubles with functions that rely on their own JS functions and triggers. Therefore, exercise caution, experiment with the features, but keep in mind that the default settings will apply. Revert to the default if something goes wrong. Here are the options available under ESI. Note that some functions require either LiteSpeed Enterprise or QUIC.cloud. Enable ESI. I simply leave it turned off because I rarely use it. Cache admin bar. It makes little difference if you cache the admin bar. You won't notice any difference, but turning this on appears to be both safe and reasonable. Cache comment form. You can enable this. The comment form is quite dynamic, which can result in increased server load. As a result, cache it. ESI non-C. This is intended for specialized plugins to ensure easy integration with the private cache. Leave it alone. Allow whatever is there to be there. There is no requirement to touch anything. Vary group. Caution. Avoid tampering with this if you are unfamiliar with what it does. Cache object tab. Unless your web hosting provider permits object caching or unless Redis or Memcache are enabled. Therefore, if you are unsure whether Redis or Memcache is installed on your server, you should avoid tampering with this one. If you have Memcache installed, the following are the settings to use. Object cache activated. Bear in mind that I have Memcache installed. If you're unsure whether it's available on your server, simply contact your host. That is also okay if Redis is enabled. You can activate it. Method. Though Redis is the preferred approach, Memcached will suffice if Redis is not available. Host. It is automatically populated when LiteSpeed Cache discovers Redis or Memcached. Port. Unless you're using a specific port to install Redis or Memcache, the default value should be okay. Default object lifetime. 360 seconds is the default value. This should be acceptable. If your dynamic content is not refreshed regularly, you can raise this frequency. Username. You will require it if you are using a SASL secured fork of Memcache. Generally, you will not require this item. Password. Generally, you will not require it. Redis database ID. If you do not already have Redis installed, there is no reason to bother. If you already have Redis installed, you should leave it alone unless you have an alternative Redis database ID to provide to increase performance on clogged Redis databases. Global groups. Whatever is currently present is sufficient. You can always add more if necessary. However, exercise caution. You should be knowledgeable about your endeavors. Do not cache groups. As before, do not tamper with this. If something is already present, leave it alone. If you need to add additional groups, you can do so, but you should do it with caution. Persistent connection. Always keep it turned on. This is the safest course of action. Cache WP admin off. If you want to improve the performance of your backend, you should consider switching hosts or upgrading the server. If you enable it, it may occasionally obtain stale data from the object cache. Store transients. Maintain it enabled if you are disabling the Cache WP admin option. The latter three options can be enabled or disabled based on your need. You can either turn them all off or turn them all on. Without a slow backend, there is no reason to use object cache in the first place. Cache. Browser tab. Browser cache. Leave it turned on. Browser cache is critical for website performance. By enabling this, users' browsers will be able to cache and save static files locally. Browser cache TTL. The default setting is sufficient. It is initially set to 1 year. You may shorten it, but it must not be fewer than 30 days. Cache. Advanced tab. This section is intended for advanced users. As a result, ensure that you understand what you're doing. Login cookie. This option is required if you have many sites on the same domain. Here, each site must have its own unique login cookie identification to ensure that LiteSpeed Cache is not confused about which visitors are logging in or logged into which site. Improve HTTPS compatibility. Turn this off. To begin, you should avoid having mixed information on your site in the first place. This may cause an error with the SSL status. If you are employing mixed content, you can enable this option. I'm going to assume that your site does not include any mixed content. That is an extremely awful idea. Instant click. When a user hovers over a link on your site, this functionality preloads the link. If a user hovers over multiple links before clicking on one, the server load can quickly increase. If your server is insecure, you should disable instant click. Page Optimization, CSS Settings tab. If you've utilized other optimization features, you've almost certainly encountered the options found here. It will warn you that the settings in this section may cause your site to break. Therefore, experiment, and if you discover something strange, something that isn't quite right about the site, you'd be wise to revert to the original. Enabling some parameters here did not break my site in my situation. Additionally, my server is sufficiently powerful to handle such requests using this plugin. I continue to use Cloudflare, which handles these things at the DNS level and thus does not place a strain on my server. If you do not already have Cloudflare or another CDN capable of managing these issues at the DNS level, you can utilize it. Allow Cloudflare or another CDN to handle this for you. These parameters are not required to be enabled via the plugin. If you're still certain about implementing this via the plugin, here's what I do. CSS minify. Indeed, on. This decreases the size of the CSS files and speeds up the loading of the page. If you're using a CDN, disable it and allow the CDN to manage it at the DNS level. CSS combine. Take extreme caution. This has the potential to cause your website to fail. Therefore, turn it on and observe what occurs. Keep it if it is not interfering with your site's functionality. Inline CSS async lib. Off. CSS is by definition render blocking. If it is not render blocking, a FOUC error will occur. As a result, attempting to eliminate render blocking is a bad idea. Font display optimization. Swap is recommended as the default. Change it to default or block if you are getting FOUT. Page optimization, JS Settings tab. As previously stated, you are probably better off delegating this duty to Cloudflare or another CDN. Here are my recommended configurations. JS minify, off. Utilize a CDN to accomplish this at the DNS level. If you are not currently using a CDN, you can enable it. JS combine. Take precautions and turn it off. Although it has the potential to ruin your site, you are always welcome to give it a try. For example, I leave it enabled because it does not cause any issues with my site. Because the theme and plugins I use are not significantly reliant on JS, I feel pretty secure using them. JS Combine external and inline. If you are enabling JS Combine, you can choose this option to retain the priority with which JS is run, hence minimizing the potential of mistakes when enabling JS Combine in the previous option. I keep this enabled, and it has a negligible impact on my site. Load JS deferred. That is something I will never advocate. Certain JavaScript functions are required for above-the-fold functionality. You should not put them off. However, depending on the design of your site, when I enable this option, for example, my website remains unaffected. Page optimization, optimization settings tab. HTML minify, switch it off. Allow the CDN or Cloudflare to take care of this. If you wish to utilize it, enable it, but keep in mind that it will increase server demand. Allow it to occur at the DNS level. DNS prefetch. Your website may contain assets that are loaded from external domains. This can be used to preload all external domains' DNS records. If you're unsure what to enter in that field, open your website in incognito mode in Chrome. Right-click it, and then click Inspect and then Sources. You'll see a list of all available external domains. In the DNS Prefetch field, enter those domains and click the Save button. DNS Prefetch Control. By enabling this option, any URLs called from JS and CSS will be automatically prefetched. This is essentially the same as the prior choice. If you manually added URLs in the previous setting, you can leave it off. Remove query strings. If you have completed all necessary changes to your website and there are no more to be made, you can securely enable this option. However, if you are making frequent updates to your site, turn this off, as it will result in stale CSS and JS difficulties. Take precautions and leave it turned off. Load Google Fonts asynchronously. By enabling this, you can ensure that Google Fonts are downloaded quickly and do not slow down your site. However, the majority of websites you visit will already use Google Fonts, and your browser will very certainly have cached them. Turning this option on may not result in a significant increase in site speed. Therefore, put it to the test. If you notice a difference after turning it on, leave it alone. Remove Google Fonts. If you do not want Google Fonts to be loaded on all pages simultaneously, you must enable this option. According to the LiteSpeed documentation, This option is for users who are loading fonts locally and do not want to call external Google fonts. Now, individuals adept at loading fonts locally will never have difficulty dequeuing Google fonts. If you are such an expert, you will never need to use this option. Indeed, your skill may enable you to completely avoid caching plugins. You can manage to cache independently, remove WordPress emoji on, there will be no complications. It will deactivate a little JS script that invokes emojis. Indeed, the majority of current browsers now natively support emojis. Eliminating this JS has no effect. Remove NoScript tag. A NoScript tag is used to indicate that an older browser does not support JS due to security concerns. NoScript tags can eat up space and cause the website to slow down. I doubt that anyone still uses such ancient browsers, and hence the NoScript tag can be safely removed. Naturally, if you want to maintain complete compatibility with outdated browsers, leave this option off. Page optimization, media settings. Lazy load images. Yes, turn on the lights. You should employ lazy image loading to optimize your website's performance. When this option is enabled, images will load as the user scrolls down the page. By enabling this, initial HTTP requests will be reduced, increasing page speed. Basic image placeholder. You can design a simple image placeholder that will appear until the actual image is loaded completely. A default image placeholder is already provided. You are not required to take any action if you wish to use the existing one. Indeed, I would recommend that you leave it alone and let LiteSpeed use the default cache. Responsive placeholder on. This ensures that the appropriate amount of space is reserved for images and that your content does not jump around. Leaving it turned off will result in cumulative layout changes on mobile devices, which Google despises. You can, however, switch it off if you wish to earn money from misclicked advertisements. Responsive placeholder SVG. There is nothing to do at this location. This field is already filled in. Leave it alone. That's all. The placeholder will display a responsive SVG. Responsive placeholder color. The gray color scheme appears to be appropriate. You can modify it if you wish. LQIP cloud generator. Alternatively to displaying a basic color for the placeholder, you can display a low-quality image placeholder. This is a very advanced technique that displays a very low-quality rendition of the image before fast switching to the high-quality image. It's an excellent option because it not only eliminates the distraction of lazy loading but also gives your site the appearance of loading quickly. LQIP quality. The higher the quality, the larger the file and, thus, the larger the page. This results in a slower loading page. Although 4 is the recommended value, you may use 1. LQIP dimensions. If your image dimensions are fewer than the ones specified below, LiteSpeed Cache will not produce LQIP for it. 150 by 150 is a recommended value. You can, however, set it as low as 10 by 10. Generate LQIP in background. Turn this on to increase the speed of your page. Following that, the LQIP will be created in the background using a cron-based queue. You are not required to perform any manual tasks. However, if you see a lengthy queue of images, you can manually run the queue rather than waiting for the cron to do it for you. Lazy load iframes. If your website contains videos or other embedded content, you should turn this on. It will help your website load faster by deferring the loading of iframes until they enter the viewport. Page optimization. Media excludes tab. Lazy load image excludes. Here, you can choose which photos you want to exclude from lazy loading. This is generally the best approach for photos that load above the fold. Lazy load image class name excludes. Rather than listing the images above, you can omit them by specifying their CSS class. Lazy load image parent class name excludes. If certain images lack a CSS class, you may simply exclude their parent class from lazy loading. Lazy load iframe class name excludes. You can utilize the assigned CSS class to disable lazy loading for specific videos. This should be done for videos that are displayed above the fold. Additionally, you can use this for photos that take a long time to load and you don't want any delays when they do. Lazy load iframe parent class name excludes. If no CSS class is supplied to the iframes, simply include their parent class to omit the videos. Lazy load URI excludes. This is where you can specify which pages do not require lazy image loading. Landing pages are an excellent example. LQIP excludes. If you don't want to generate low-quality picture placeholders for specific photos, you can specify their full URL or partial text here. This is advantageous if your photographs are already highly optimized and load quickly. Page optimization, localization. Gravatar cache. If your site receives a high volume of comments, you should enable it. If your site receives few comments and the majority of your posts receive no comments at all, turn it off. Gravatar cache cron. Leave this on if you are caching Gravatar. If Gravatar cache is disabled, this option should be disabled as well. Gravatar Cache TTL. The default value is 1 week. However, it is okay to increase the TTL. The majority of users are unconcerned with frequently updating their Gravatar. Localize resources. Certain materials on your website are loaded via an external URL. For instance, take a look at Google Analytics. You can localize them to increase the speed with which the page loads. There is already a long list of domains that are available for localization. You can add all of them, or, if you know which resources are loaded externally, you can add domains selectively. When localization is enabled, URLs are copied and replaced with their equivalents in the local language. Additionally, you should be aware that this option will function only with HTTPS URLs. Page optimization, tuning. CSS excludes. You can specify which CSS files or inline CSS codes you do not want LiteSpeed Cache to minify in this section. JS excludes. Similar to the previous option, if there are some JS files that you don't want to be minified and combined, you can mention them here. 2 files have already been added, jQuery.js and jQuery.min.js. They should not be mixed or reduced in size. Therefore, leave them alone. You may also provide more files. Critical CSS rules. If you are not generating important CSS, you can safely disregard this and leave the area blank. However, if you are creating essential CSS and have enabled asynchronous CSS loading, you should establish the rules for above-the-fold content to avoid design concerns. You shouldn't be touching this unless you know what you are doing. The option is for advanced users. JS deferred excludes. None of the JS files listed here will be deferred. It's especially useful if you require specific JS files to load crucial content on your site. URI excludes. If you wish to exclude specific pages from optimization, you can do so here. Role excludes. The roles you select in this segment will not see the effects of any optimization you carry out on your website. The number of roles accessible will depend on your site layout. CDN Settings tab. QUIC.Cloud CDN. Whether or if you turn it on is entirely up to you. I recommend that you sign up for QUIC.Cloud's free tier program. I leave it enabled since it aids in the optimization of low-quality image placeholders, image compression, and several other aspects of the website. You can completely disable it if you wish. Use CDN mapping. If you are using a CDN other than QUIC.Cloud and or Cloudflare, you must enable and configure this one. When configuring, you must enter the CDN URL and specify which file types to include in the CDN. Multiple CDNs are supported. For instance, you could use one CDN to serve images, another to serve videos, and yet another to serve static files. If you use numerous CDNs to store the same files, LiteSpeed Cache will choose randomly HTML attributes to replace. Keep whatever is there and refrain from touching it. Original URLs. Unless you have a multilingual site or a multi-site configuration that utilizes numerous domains or subdomains, you do not need to take any action here. Include directories. The default directories should be good enough. However, you are always free to add more directories. Exclude path. If there are directories within the included directories, you can exclude them from this list. Cloudflare API. This should be used if you are utilizing Cloudflare. You must supply your Cloudflare email address, the Cloudflare Global API key, and the website. There is nothing else to do. There are no known conflicts between the QUIC.Cloud CDN and Cloudflare. Both can operate concurrently. It's effective for me. CDN Manage tab. There is nothing to do at this location. Simply let everything alone. If you merely want to clear the Cloudflare cache, you may do it easily from here. Image optimization. Image optimization summary. LiteSpeed includes picture compression capabilities, which are quite remarkable. It's quite simple to use, and you can rapidly select whether to keep or remove backups on your server. Image optimization. Image optimization settings tab. Auto request cron. You are not required to submit an image optimization request manually. Simply enable this option, and your site will request image optimization automatically. Auto pull cron. Once the optimization process is complete, you are no longer need to manually upload the optimized photographs to your site. You can enable this and all optimized photos will download automatically. Optimize original images. Yes, switch it on. Optimized versions of the original photographs will be kept as a backup. Remove original backups. This should be turned off. I strongly advise you to save the original photos before deleting them. Optimize losslessly. Off. If this option is disabled, lossy compression is used to optimize the photographs. If you run a photography website where graphics are critical, you should enable this. Lossy compression removes superfluous data from photos, resulting in a decreased file size. Lossy compression is ideal for the majority of websites. Preserve EXIF, XMP data. Each photograph contains critical data. If you have obtained express written permission to use copyrighted photographs, you should keep this data. If you are using stock photographs, the data can be safely removed. Eliminating the data further reduces the file size and contributes to a faster website load time. As a result, disable this option. Create WebP version. Switch it on. Google is promoting the WebP format, even though not all browsers support it. However, it will eventually become a standard format. As a result, you'd be wise to begin developing a WebP version immediately. Image WebP replacement. Switch it on. This will replace the pictures with optimized WebP counterparts, resulting in a considerable increase in page loading time on compatible browsers. WebP attributes to replace. Avoid touching it. Whatever is present is ideal. WebP for extra SRC set. If your site contains photos that are not maintained by the WordPress media library, you can enable this option to make those images WebP compatible as well. WordPress image quality control. This value specifies the degree of compression required. Although 82 is the default, you can explore. Generally, the default value is sufficient. Database Manage tab. This is where one-click database optimization features are located. The following are the options available to you. Clean all. By clicking this, you'll be taken to the page's other optimization options. This is the button to click if you do not wish to undertake selective optimization. Post revisions. It's perfectly normal to make post modifications when writing a post. After publishing the content, you can choose to erase those revisions. Auto drafts. When you change a post, WordPress automatically saves it. WordPress saves these drafts to the database. Once the posts are published, you can delete the drafts. Trashed posts. If you've deleted some posts, you can locate them in the trash folder and restore them later. If you are certain that you no longer want such posts, you can delete them from the database. Spam comments. All comments, approved, pending, trashed, and spam, are saved. You can recover deleted comments from your trash or spam folders. If you are certain you do not want them, you can either delete them from the comments section or completely remove them from this segment. Nothing will remain in the database. Trashed comments. Do I need to explain again? Trackbacks and pingbacks. You can safely remove them. Expired transients. Yes, they should be removed. It is secure. If you do not remove them, the database's size will continue to rise and eventually impair performance. All transients. Again, deleting these transients is safe. However, depending on your object cache settings, certain transients may not be erased. For example, if you disable the WP admin cache, you must save transients, which you cannot remove from database optimization. Optimize tables. Yes, you may do so. It is completely secure. Database summary. This is where you can find the size of the autoload data. It should ideally be less than 1 megabyte. If the total size of the autoload exceeds 1 megabyte, you must clear some autoload data in PHPMyAdmin. The majority of these autoload items will come from plugins and themes that you've used in the past. Database Optimization Settings tab. Revision max numbers. This is where you can specify the number of revisions to retain during database optimization. Usually, I leave it at 0, as I publish posts only after thoroughly reviewing them. I am not required to revert. If you need to revert to a previous version, you can choose how many revisions to retain. Bear in mind, however, that if your database is huge, saving an excessive number of revisions is never a smart idea. Revision max age. You can specify a time limit after which revisions are automatically erased. For some, this is perfectly okay. For some, this may be a frightening scenario, since there may be an issue with the post that they are unaware of for an extended period. That is where revisions can help. Automatically deleting revisions after a certain period may deprive you of the option to restore the revisions and correct the errors. As a result, place it carefully. Crawler Summary tab. These options may make sense if you control the server. The majority of hosts will not even enable the crawler option due to resource consumption. Therefore, unless you own the server, are on a dedicated server, or are using a very high-end VPS, fiddling with these settings is pointless. Nonetheless, if you like, here is what I recommend. Crawler General Settings tab. Crawler. Allow this only if you have a dedicated server or a VPS dedicated to your site or sites. Enabling this on shared hosting with other websites may cause a lot of problems, and you may receive an angry email from the web provider requesting that you reduce server resources or switch to a VPS. Enabling this will result in the creation of an auto cache delay. Only if your website has more than 30,000 pages should you tinker with the default value. Run duration. Again, the default is perfectly acceptable. You can increase it if necessary for a priority site. Interval between runs. The default setting is ideal. However, if your server is inactive for an extended period or if you have a priority site, you can reduce this amount. Crawl interval. This interval specifies the frequency with which the full sitemap is crawled. By default, the duration is set to 3.5 days. If you have a small site with fewer than 3,000 pages or if the server is yours, you can set it to 1 day. Threads. The default number is 3, which is perfectly okay. Setting it to a higher level is meaningless if you have thousands of pages. Bear in mind that increasing the crawl rate increases CPU use. Therefore, if your server hosts multiple websites, never increase it over the default setting. Timeout. The default setting of 30 is ideal. If a page takes longer than 30 seconds to load, the crawl timeouts, or comes to a halt, you can increase it. But that makes no sense. That is, truly, why should it take 30 seconds to crawl a page? Server load limit. You can increase the load limit if you have your server. Even if you own the server, you should not exceed the 2-3 load limit. However, in the majority of circumstances, the default value of 1 is sufficient for the majority of websites. Crawler. Simulation Settings tab. If you wish to pre-crawl pages for logged-in users, you must deal with simulation settings. The crawl already covers non-logged-in public users. Role simulation. If you want the LiteSpeed Cache to pre-cache for certain logged-in users, you must fill in this box with their IDs. Each line may contain just one ID. Cookie simulation. This is the option to enable pre-crawling of particular cookies. Crawler. Sitemap Settings tab. Custom sitemap. If you wish the crawler to use the Google XML sitemap rather than its own, you can give the sitemap's complete URL. Drop domain from sitemap. If your sitemap does not contain numerous domains, you should leave this on to conserve database storage. Sitemap timeout. If LiteSpeed Cache is unable to interpret the sitemap within the specified duration, it will time out. Simply, parsing will be terminated. The default value is quite okay. Toolbox Purge. This is where you can remove LiteSpeed Cache plugin-generated caches. There is nothing to explain in this instance. You can erase everything you want selectively. If you have a huge website, the opcode cache, CSS, JS, and pages are the most critical components. Additionally, if you wish to manually purge everything, ensure that you modify the cache section's auto-purge rules. Toolbox Import/Export. This is the section where you can export the LiteSpeed Cache settings and use them on another website. Additionally, you can import settings from another website. If you are unclear about the settings you have made and wish to restore to the LiteSpeed Cache defaults, you can do so as well. Simply keep in mind that importing and exporting will retain the precise settings you specified for a different site. If you require site-specific configurations, you must avoid using these tools. Toolbox Edit htaccess. To be clear, this is intended for sophisticated users. Unless you are an expert, tampering with this part can result in the complete destruction of your site. Therefore, exercise caution and do not complain that I did not warn you. This is a convenient feature of LS Cache because it eliminates the need to access the htaccess file through FTP. Current htaccess content. This is where you may view the contents of your website's htaccess file. You may edit this section. However, exercise caution. Make adjustments only when you are certain of your actions. Toolbox Heartbeat. If you are unfamiliar with WordPress Heartbeat, you should avoid tampering with it. Consider not messing with this on a live site. The AJAX call is the WordPress Heartbeat. It makes use of a file named admin-ajax PHP, which is located in the WP admin subdirectory. You should never attempt to optimize it until you are certain that this file is consuming a significant amount of CPU. To determine whether or not this file is the cause, you should examine speed test waterfalls. There is information available there. This file could very well be the source of the problem. In such a case, you must optimize. However, you should be well knowledgeable on how to perform such optimizations. If you commit an act of stupidity, you will virtually immediately demolish your website. Some users believe that completely disabling the file will address the issue. But this is not the case unless some rogue plugin with bloated code uses that specific file. Rather than that, attempt to uninstall the plugin. If deleting the plugin is not an option and you are forced to optimize the file, Simply increase the interval at which the file is utilized and disable it on pages that do not need it. The most frequent instances in which you'll need to play with your heartbeat are as follows: keeping the cart count updated in a WooCommerce store as products are added or removed. Posts are automatically saved in the WordPress editor. While these are not the only instances, they are unquestionably the most prevalent. If you choose to alter or optimize something for whatever purpose, the following information is necessary. Front-end heartbeat control. Activate if you require changing the interval. Front-end heartbeat TTL. It is set to 60 seconds by default. If the front end makes use of the heartbeat, you can boost it to 120 seconds. If the front end does not use heartbeat, this value should be set to 0 to disable it. Backend heartbeat control. Activate if you require changing the interval. Backend heartbeat TTL. By default, 60 seconds is used. You can increase the duration up to 120 seconds. However, because the backend is extremely safe, you can disable it by setting the value to 0. Editor heartbeat. It is suggested that you leave this turned off. The default setting is off, and you should leave it alone. This is how WordPress saves your posts automatically. At times, your internet connection may fail or you may accidentally close the editor window. In these instances, the auto-saving mechanism maintains a copy of the file that you can recover. Editor heartbeat TTL. If you have a large number of writers on your website at the same time, you should consider increasing the value. Never set the option to 0 to disable it. 15 is the default value. Toolbox report. Install Do Login Security. If you need to grant temporary admin access to someone, you must install this plugin. This is a method for granting access to the LiteSpeed Cache support team. The link will grant administrator access without requiring a password or username. LiteSpeed report. This feature enables you to send detailed reports to LS Cache's official support staff. Passwordless link. You can generate a URL to WP admin that is password-free. To activate the Create button, however, you'll need the Do Login Security plugin stated previously. Notes: when you email a report to the LS Cache support staff or to a developer, you can include additional details about the issue you're experiencing. The more information you provide, the better your chances of receiving an appropriate response. Toolbox Debug Settings. To be honest, the majority of users are not technically savvy, and hence are unlikely to peruse the logs. However, you can use the choices to email the logs to the support team. The following are the configuration options. Disable all features. When this feature is enabled, all other LS Cache features and LS Cache are disabled. Debug log. Utilize this feature solely while debugging an issue. If your site receives a high volume of visitors, you should select the administrator IP-only option. Admin IPs. This is where you may put the IP addresses of all your site's administrators. If you are the sole occupant, you must include your IP address. Debug level. You can debug at a basic or intermediate level. You may select whatever you desire. If you choose advanced debugging, the logs will contain far more information. Log file size limit. You can specify the size of the log file. The maximum size that can be specified is 3000 megabytes. The smallest file size permitted is 3 megabytes. If advanced debugging is enabled, the log file size will rise. Log cookies. You can enable this option if you wish to log the values of the requested cookies. Collapse query strings. Condensing the query strings improves the readability of the debug logs. Therefore, toggle on the option to collapse the query strings. Debug URI includes. If you are experiencing troubles with specific pages, you can include their URLs in the report to ensure that the information is limited to those sites. Debug URI excludes. If you want to omit specific pages from the log, you can use this segment to include the URLs of such pages. This is especially useful if your entire site is experiencing troubles save for a few URLs. Toolbox log view. There are two possibilities here: empty log and empty log. Both buttons accomplish the same thing. They delete the log. Is a shortcut to the log clearing button. Toolbox beta test. This is where beta versions of LiteSpeed Cache from GitHub can be tested. You may easily switch between development and stable release versions. However, I will never propose that you use a beta version on a live site. Generally, beta versions are filled with bugs. You can test LiteSpeed Cache's performance on a staging site using the beta version. How to determine whether or not LiteSpeed Cache is working. This is a very good question. There is a simple way for determining whether or not LiteSpeed Cache is functioning properly on your site. The following are the steps. Open your website in any browser's incognito mode. Open a couple of pages at random. After a few pages have been opened, right-click on any random page and then click on View Page Source. Press Ctrl+F to bring up the on-page search option on the resulting page. Enter LiteSpeed. You should see outcomes. If you do not see LiteSpeed Cache on the page, it is not working. If you see results, then LiteSpeed Cache is operational. Additionally, initial page loads will be slow, but subsequent page loads will be lightning quick. After that, you can test the results using Google Page Speed Insights or GT metrics. Conclusion. I hope this video will help you configure the LiteSpeed Cache on your WordPress website properly and enjoy a fast-loading website. Thanks for watching.